Welcome to our first episode of Crossings Conversations. And today I sat down with Chris and we talked through his calling and just a little bit of the story behind his call to plant a church. And so thanks for listening, and I hope this is a blessing for you. All right, we're live. We're not really live, but we're live. We're here, and we're live whenever you guys are listening. This is Matt Powell, and I'm the lead pastor at Crossings Community Church, and I'm here with Christopher.
Hello.
Chris is our worship and community pastor at Crossings, and we've got this idea. We don't know how crazy it is or how well it'll work, but the idea was maybe we have these conversations to be able to communicate better, well, more to our people, at least at Crossings. Maybe it's a value to others around, but just to communicate a little bit more about what's going on with us. I pitched it to Chris a couple weeks ago, and Chris thought it was
a good idea. Another great idea by Matt Powell.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So we're in the middle of this series at Crossings right now. Actually, we just started, as of this recording, we started it last weekend, Making Room. And it's kind of like another vision series for us. We usually only do one of those a year, but we feel like God's really laid it on our heart to specifically pursue this future ministry home. And so for 7 weeks, we're laying out these ideas and components that kind of all fit together like a puzzle to paint that picture of why and how to pursue that. And we just kind of thought, what better time, because central to our vision isn't just that we build a facility for the sake of a facility, but that we want it to be a sending facility. And at the same time, as crazy as it sounds, we're in the middle of working on and preparing and praying and expecting to plant a church in the near future. So I'm here with Chris, and we just wanted to dive maybe a little deeper into the story that we haven't had the opportunity to share on a Sunday morning or in other contexts. So first question here for Chris is, Chris, tell us a little bit about how and why you've got this desire to plant a church, how it all started for you.
Yeah, so I've been, I was invited onto a full-time staff position way back in 2001. And that's kind of where all of this really began for me. I think ministry is a bit like a bug that you get bit with at some point in your life. And if I know a lot of people might understand that analogy, but it's something that I didn't really picture for myself as I was a young man. But as I was around mentors, pastors, leaders, and was just kind of, God just sort of opened up some doorways for me. I really began to see ministry not as just sort of a temporary station, but as a long-term thing in my life. And so I've been serving in various roles. Back at Texas State University, I led and worked in a college ministry called Crosstalk, Eat 'em Up Cats. If there's any Bobcats out there, we love you. Matt and I are both Bobcats, so we have a very dear place in our hearts for San Marcos and Texas State University.
And Wimberley, Texas.
And Wimberley.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I was serving there. I've been very involved in worship primarily. Music is my background. Recording is my background. In fact, doing this podcast is driving me nuts because everything's live. And when you record music, you do it over and over till you get it perfect. And so the idea of just rolling this thing is killing me. But
hey, we're being authentic, right? When you have two church planners gathered together, it's like their authenticity must manifest. So we're using all the right words today as we're talking about this whole church planting thing.
Yeah, so I've served in worship and currently serve as a pastor of worship in community at Crossings. But it was in 2014 when I was serving at a church in Round Rock, a great church called Central Baptist Church. Their pastor there is Mark Westerfield, and really enjoyed being there. But I had this kind of gnawing sense inside of me, like there was something more that I was called to do, and I was up one night. We were in the middle of fixing up a house, and a whole family was upstairs. I was downstairs, and I kind of had the whole lay of the land to myself. And it was just a time for me to pray. And I was praying that night and just kind of laying out before God everything that was going on inside of me. Not that he didn't know, but it just really kind of therapeutic for me to just pray those things out. Oh. And so as I was doing that night, I just kind of laid out everything that was going on inside of me and just asked the simple question, what do you want me to do? And I've had this happen very few times in my life where you have a very strong, clear sense of the Holy Spirit speaking to you. And I felt at that moment, the Holy Spirit said to me, plant a church. And that's kind of where this really began. I've always been excited about church planting. I know it's healthy, it's good, it's kingdom-minded. But I've always been in the thought of I would love to support someone. I'd love to be maybe a secondary guy, never as a primary kind of spearhead for a church plant. And so that's where it all kind of began for me.
That's good. So sometimes you hear guys, I've talked to a lot of church planters, I know you have too, Chris, you hear them talk about planting a church. Sometimes, I don't want to say oftentimes, but sometimes it's things got so horrible with all of their other experiences, they felt like they had no other option but to blaze a new trail. So that night that you're describing where you had that gnawing sense, you're up late, you're praying, was that because your whole world was crashing down at that moment and you needed a way out?
No, it wasn't that everything was crashing down. I think it was just that, I can't remember who coined this term divine discontent. Do you remember who? But someone coined this term of this divine discontent. Like there's something inside of you that it's like the Lord just won't let you let you be. And so it wasn't that I was angry. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't upset. It was literally just this sense inside of me, like there's something more that I need to be doing.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I remember that for me. I remember wrestling with that call, but then all of a sudden there was a moment, and for me it was just this undeniable reality that this is what I must do.
Yeah.
And at that moment there wasn't any question. It wasn't a maybe. Truthfully, it wasn't even I need to continue praying, asking God if I should do it.
Yeah.
It was God told me when and how.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those moments of great confidence. And I, like you said, it's not something that happens all the time, but maybe, I don't know, maybe the way that our God works, he in these kind of moments when he knows that you're about to begin a journey where everything is going to always come back to how much confidence do you have in his call that you're doing what he asks you to do. He wants to make those so clear.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I mean, I think about all the big characters in the Bible and how there was a moment where God had to get very clear with him, whether it be a burning bush or a talking donkey or whatever but God was very, very clear. And I think there's moments for us where God has to be so laser clear for us because we, I think in and of ourselves, we will tend to choose what is easiest. But God seems to always call us to things that are just not easy. They take a lot of risk. They take a lot of faith. They take a lot of energy and effort and all of those things. And so I needed that. I needed that clarity of God speaking something so specific to me.
That's good. That's good. So talk to us a little bit about how Richmond came into the mix of that moment. Do you feel like, was it that moment, that night when you had that gnawing feeling, you're up late and you're praying, was it immediately, you're going to plant a church and here it is? Or was that something that kind of came out of more and deeper prayer and processing?
Yeah. So kind of how that all unfolded is that after that night of praying, I had no idea where it was going to be. In fact, I pictured it happening in Round Rock, where I was currently serving.
Why leave the Texas Hill Country?
Yeah, exactly. It's where I'm from. I grew up in Round Rock. I was born and raised in Austin. I have have lots of family. I have lots of friends there. We had so many connections that it would have made a lot of sense to plant in Round Rock. But that clarity really didn't come later. In fact, I had another church in the Austin area that approached me about possibly serving there. And just as soon as they asked me, I just had this sense in my spirit, again, so clear, no. And then Matt called me. It had to be several months after that time. And Matt called me and just said, hey, we're at a point here where we're looking for a pastor of worship. And would you consider that and pray about it? And I had had such a clarity before of a no. And when Matt asked me, I just had this sense of maybe.
Yeah.
Which was a little unsettling to me. In fact, I remember telling my wife, Casey, and she said, I have that sick feeling like we're going to do this.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember all of this or not, but so the very first contact that I made with you about this was a text message. And I remember, because by personality, I'm so premeditated, and I think through everything I do probably too much. But I sent this text message to Chris. It was at a time where we had decided, the elders of Crossings had decided we're going to hire a full-time worship pastor, and we'd love for them to be able to do small groups as well. And I remember sitting in an elders meeting talking about that, and I was like, man, it's going to be so hard to find that guy. But guys, I do have one idea, only one idea of somebody who I feel like could do that well. And so I had talked to I had talked to Chris for years about this. It was super informal ideas about coming and joining us. Matter of fact,
like so informal that I had no idea that he was telling me that.
Yeah, it was my way of like slowly brainwashing Chris into this reality.
Little seeds.
Yes, praise the Lord. So we're all the way back in. This would have been probably 2000 and maybe early 2006. And Chris, you remember this? I came to you talking about the church plant. Yeah. You and I sat down at Mochas and Javas.
Yeah.
And here I was in a place starting a new church, and I had to order all of this sound equipment.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought immediately back then, so what is that, almost 11 years ago, almost exactly 11 years ago, there's no one better that I know of who could help me order the right sound equipment than Chris Kipp. And so we sat down there in that coffee shop that day, and literally everything that I bought and everything that we used until you joined staff.
I know, yeah.
Some of the same stuff we have today is stuff that back then he picked out for us to order.
What's funny is when I came on staff, I think I remember asking you, man, how did y'all pick all this gear? Because I had forgotten about that conversation. Yeah. And you said, well, you picked it out. And I was like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I did.
I did a great job.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's awesome. So, fast forward some years, and I sent Chris this text message, and the text message went something like this. Hey, we're looking for an SRT major who graduated from Texas State University, has a great passion for worship as well as discipleship. Do you know anybody? And of course, that was Chris's major from Texas State, sound recording technology. And so, I don't remember exactly what Chris said, but his reply, so that was kind of my softball to him, and his reply left the door open. So I was like, okay, praise the Lord. Maybe the conversation can continue. And so we did pick up, and we had some phone conversations, Chris asking great questions about Crossings, who we were, what was important to us, and our expectations, and some great long phone conversations.
Yeah.
But Chris, do you remember the first time that you shared with me about that desire? It was a couple conversations in about the whole church plant thing.
Yeah, I didn't want to spring that on you first thing.
Right. Yeah.
But I remember us talking on the phone, and me saying basically, as we walk down this road of just kind of seeing if this is going to be a fit, I just need you to know that I feel like God's called me to plant a church.
Yeah.
And I remember you I think you paused for a second, kind of like, okay, let me absorb what he just said. And then immediately saying, that's actually part of our vision as a church, is to be a church that plants churches. And do you feel like God's given you specifics on timeline, place, all those kinds of questions? I said, no, literally all I know is I was praying and I felt like God said, plant a church. Yeah. And that's really all I have to go on. And so that's kind of where this all began. And as we were talking on the phone, we're going back and forth, meeting elders, all the process that unfolded, I was really praying the whole time, okay, God, is this what you have for us? I know you've called us to plant a church. How does this fit into that calling? And I remember we had talked for months probably. I'm the same way as you. I think through it over and over and over again, and I kind of think through all the angles, and was finally at a point of like, everything is checking out here, but okay, God, what I really need now is I need another moment of clarity from you. And I was just praying. I remember sitting on my couch in my living room there in Round Rock, and having that kind of conversation with God, just praying, Lord, I've always pictured this church plant happening in Round Rock. Why would you take me somewhere else to bring me back here? So where do you want this to happen? And it was, again, one of those just really bizarre moments of clarity. In the same way that I felt like he had said plant a church, he said Richmond.
Yeah.
And I had never, the only Richmond that I had ever heard of was Richmond, Virginia.
We're moving to Virginia.
So I'm
honey.
like, Virginia?
Right.
And of course, I immediately, whenever God speaks, you Google it, right? So I Googled
Test
Richmond.
everything by the Google.
Tested by the Google. I Googled Richmond, Texas, thinking, is there even such a place? And literally it pops up on my phone there, and Richmond sits right south of Cinco Ranch, where Matt's calling me to come. And so for me, it was just kind of that sense of, oh my gosh, this is for real. This is God's plan unfolding before my...
More confirmation.
Exactly. Yeah. God's plan unfolding. And so that's really kind of how Richmond became a part of it. So we've come here truly by faith. And I remember calling Casey, my wife, and just saying, hey, I feel like God spoke to me again. And she's like, okay. And I said, I feel like God's calling us to Richmond. And of course, she says, Virginia?
Right.
I'm like, no. And she goes, Dallas? And I'm like, no, that's Richardson. Just Google Richmond, Texas. And of course, she was, her mind was blown as well as we're talking through that. So, we're here in Richmond, Texas, and we're excited, and we're here really trusting that God's going to fulfill what he's spoken to us.
Yeah, I remember it was funny to me that you remember the details of my pause, because I remember in that phone conversation you sharing that with me, and I can tell you what the pause was. Just again, to use the word authentic as many times as we can during this discussion, the hiring process is really difficult. I mean, it's just difficult because you're wrestling so much with the right fit and who, and you're asking the Lord. And so excited. My initial reaction when you said that, it was my flesh, and it was like, oh man, all of this, and felt like we got the greatest person we could find. Thank you, Jesus. And now he's telling me he's going to plan to leave, So it was just that flesh, that immediate response. But then, like Chris said, I mean, it was also a confirmation for me and our eldership, because the truth is, since day one of our church, our passion has been church planning, and we've been involved in church planning in so many different ways, internationally and even locally. But our hope and desire was very soon to be even more intimately involved in church planning and to actually send out a church planter. And so, if it wasn't confirmation enough to know Chris as well as that I have for all of these years, for him to share that and it to resonate with our vision. And I remember when I took that phone conversation kind of back to our elders and shared it with them, they were like, well, yeah, it makes sense. That's what we're all about. And so it was confirming in that aspect too for us to bring him on. And so there was excitement then to follow that, just like Chris, I don't know exactly what this looks like, or I don't know how this is all going to manifest, but we're going to trust God together. We're going to walk in faith, pursuing this direction that you gave Crossings 10 or 11 years ago, and you've continued to drive us forward. And then you gave Chris years ago, and then now they're meeting, and the confirmation of that is just so exciting for us. And so maybe maybe one more question, because I'm just thinking back to my sermon on Sunday, and we looked at Acts chapter 16, and I kind of shared this idea of, Paul, with all the best motives, he thought he was going to go to this spot. But the Lord said, no, not yet. I want you to go to this spot and all
Right.
that. So that, basically that night that you stayed up late and you were praying and God gave that initial direction, that was probably 4 years ago?
Yeah, that would have been sometime in 2014 when all that happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
So since then, as you look at the years that follow, I can obviously share with you, as I think I just did, how God confirms that vision and what he's done at the crossings. But do you feel like you've experienced other things where God has continued to say, yes, yes, more confirmation that, yes, keep going? Oh,
yeah, absolutely. In fact, when I was serving in Round Rock at that point, I was meeting with a man in our church. His name's David Lloyd. He was at that time serving at Austin Bridge Builders Alliance, which is a ministry there, helping churches interface with the community. And David was just an awesome man, had been on the mission field, just a great kind of wise mentor type figure. Yeah. And I was meeting with him for coffee, and we're talking about different things going on in the life of the church. And I remember him saying to me, have you ever considered being a pastor, like a lead pastor?
Yeah.
And it kind of caught me off guard because of everything that was going on in my heart. Yeah. And I just thought, that was a little moment of confirmation, and him basically saying, I think you could do it. I think you could be that type of leader. And there have been other things along the way. I'm currently involved in the Houston Church Planting Network, which big shout out to them. It's such a great organization. Phenomenal organization. Chad Clarkson there. I know our church at Crossings, you guys know that we support Houston Church Planting Network financially because we really believe in what they're doing citywide in planting churches. So I've been a part of that residency now for about 6 months. It's called a functional residency, where I'm being trained. It's once a month we go. We have a kind of a full day of teaching, equipping. We have some assignments throughout the month that we're working through. And this month is about calling really kind of sorting through calling. But it's been a theme this entire time is basically asking that question again, are you called? Are you called? Are you called? And it's been really confirming for me to read the material and to sit under this teaching and to think and to pray. And, and again, to feel like God's saying, yes, yes, go for it. Trust me. Go for it. Trust me. And so it really is. It is a walk of faith. And I think like anything in our life where there's a walk of faith, we feel the tension, we feel parts of our flesh that are kind of a little out of line with that we have to kind of get those things in line. We also sometimes we feel that spiritual adversity that comes when we're stepping out in faith. We're doing something God calls us to do. And we feel moments where, gosh, the world is set against you or the circumstances just seem out of control. And life just gets really, really tough. But yet somehow in the midst of all the adversity, you still feel that burning thing inside of you of God saying, keep going, keep going. And so I think that's where we are today. We're still working through so much that we're hashing through as we kind of give birth to this new church. But have that sense inside of just God saying, go for it, trust me, I'm with you. And so, yeah, it's good. Well, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I've known Chris since we were early on in college. I think it was 1997 when we first met, and back in the day. That's right, back in the glory days. So I've been able to just walk alongside of Chris in many times and view many seasons of his life and the incredible blessing now of being able to walk so closely as he's working through and wrestling through all of this. And I mean, for what it's worth, I
want to constantly be that confirmation because, I mean, I think God's wired you and gifted you in such a way to love people well and extend his kingdom. So it's a blessing for Crossings as a church to be able to send someone, help equip, be a part of this, but as well for me to be confident in your calling and to see that development. It's a joy. It's a joy for us.
Thank you so much, man.
I get this question a lot. Maybe we'll make this the last question that we deal with today. There's so much more, and this is kind of an experiment for us. So depending on your feedback,
grace.
We're thinking about doing this again to touch on some other areas. But because the people of Crossings love you so, the question we often get anytime we talk about this is Chris leaving next week? Is he going to be here? Is this next month? Is he out? When's he leaving? What in the world are we going to do without Chris? So Chris, just tell us, put some hearts at ease that you're not going to be missing next Sunday.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I just want to say I love the people of Crossings as well. And very honored to serve in this body at this time. It's been such a huge blessing for me and for my family, and just all that we are experiencing, learning, seeing, growing in, just phenomenal for us. And yes, I will kind of fill you all in that have not heard me say this yet because of whatever reason, but kind of the timeline that we're working on is I'm finishing this functional residency right now. So I have about 6 months left of this residency. And I'm currently applying for what's called the finishing residency. And what that is, it's a little bit more intense. It's more frequent gatherings. And it's really working through what are those final things that a pastor needs to work through before they kind of pull the trigger on a church plant. And so that's going to be another year long. So I'm looking at basically another 18 months of training that I'm in right now. And at that time, that's when we would really look to launch the church. And so in the meantime, as we finish this residency, the functional residency, we'll probably start doing some core group gatherings and things like that. That'll be happening over that year leading up to the official launch. But I'll still be there at Crossings. I'll still be leading worship, still excited to be a part of that. And our core team will still be a part of Crossings as we are sent out by you guys. And so, so we're really looking at probably about 18 months from now to launch an actual service that will be meeting in Richmond.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So no need to panic.
Yes,
that Chris is going to vanish,
panic.
But it's really great
unless you're inwardly rejoicing, like right. Please leave.
No. Chris is a blessing for us at the Crossing. So it's good. It allows to. I love that timeline, the way that God's working that out, because more people of Crossings will feel more deeply connected with God's work at this church plant in Richmond, and that's a blessing for us, and it's a blessing for our church. And honestly, we believe that will grow both in depth and breadth. Crossings as we are involved in this church planting effort. So it gives us time to do that. Okay, well, before we close this epic initial podcast episode down, Chris, is there anything else you want to add? Anything else that you want to throw in there before we shut this thing down?
I think one thing I would just add is, yes, I'm in the midst of planting a church. I think it would be wrong for me to elevate that above any particular calling that any person listening to this podcast might have that burning sense in their chest of God's calling me to do something. It may not be planting a new church, but it could be something else, and you just have that sense. And I guess I just want to encourage you.
That's good.
To really pray, to seek out some counsel, to talk about it with your spouse or with maybe your community group, the people around you, and really kind of explore that, because I don't think you don't want to leave this life thinking, I wonder what God was trying to tell me in that season of my life. And so I just want to encourage anyone who's listening, this life that God calls us to is a life of faith. And we see over and over and over again that God speaks to his people. He leads, he guides, he shepherds his people. And so really listen to those things that burn in your heart.
It's good. That's good. All right. Well, let us know. Give us a little feedback here. Was this helpful? Do you enjoy the communication and hearing a little bit more? And we can kind of explore furthering this experiment as we move ahead. But for today and for this first conversation, we're signing out, and we will see you guys on Sunday. Thanks a lot.